Now we're going to have a quick discussion about all of this. We've asked some folks to come back and join us in a panel discussion about the project of the future. Iris and James and Bob. James, are you there? Oh, there we go. Almost. There he is. Okay, great. Well, that was pretty insightful, huh? So James, much of that touched on what Roberto mentioned briefly around intelligent production. Give us a snapshot from your perspective of what intelligent production is, how it relates to what Martin just talked about.
Yeah, so what is intelligent production? To simply put, it's a production system that is able to self-organize and self-optimize. And what's really interesting is it actually builds on some of the capability that Hunter actually also talked about. Fortunately, most of us here, again, Hunter exception, is not the ones that are actually investing to build a wireless network, actually build the data infrastructure and the internet to actually make this happen. We're actually most of the construction industry is the beneficiary of it. At the same time, the supply chain folks are all in the implementation phases of IoT to get visibility into what's actually happening, right? And then all the mobile devices that's actually out there. So once you actually have the sensors deployed throughout the value stream, and the data can be actually collected through the IoT sensors and then the wireless networks, what we actually have is the ability to now quickly build production system models and use operations as to optimize them, and then feed that information back into the supply network so we can actually figure out how to actually best optimize the production system and control it without actually having the manual decision making that actually happens on a day-to-day basis at this point in time. So that's our intelligent production.
Very good. Yeah. Did you have something else?
Yeah, and I thought it was actually very, very interesting what Martin actually talked about regarding what humans do versus what machines do. Yeah. And in terms of the intelligent production, it's interesting because as machines take certain portions of the human's hands, what humans actually have to do in response to actually be part of that or manage that actually changes. So you start to really think about the different disciplines that we actually have in different organizations in this industry that we actually have currently. We might actually have a whole new set of industries or organizations that are formed that are not the traditional trade contractors, as it actually becomes more automated. And the people that are actually called construction engineers may actually not be doing the same job that we're actually doing now if some of the things are actually being automated, right? So I think it actually brings a very, very interesting perspective. What is actual construction? Because it starts to blend with manufacturing. And in the software industry, as it matured, it actually is doing, people are building software that build the software automatically.
Yeah.
Right? So, where's the blend between mechanical engineering, robotics, artificial intelligence, and construction? I think that's something that is very interesting.
So, Bob, let's switch to you. I know you have some thoughts. You're the guy doing the real work. What does that project of the future look like to you? Oh, your audio is.
I think the big part is really mapping and understanding it, the process of construction from start to end, and making all those parts and pieces transparent to everyone else. I think we're so siloed. I don't know that any one individual, I know as a trade contractor, I really don't understand the designer's process or the owner's process in selecting, an investment to make, or necessarily the commissioning piece. So I think when we all start getting together and communicating, you're going to start to see everyone having a much better understanding due to the transparency and sharing that data. And I think the decision trees are going to be they're going to be much more rich in data. And I think the decisions that are going to be made are going to be different because they're going to be based on data and facts instead of based on feel, or they're going to be based on the entire production system instead of just your silo. I think it's we talked a little bit earlier about this this idea of construction being very stage gated, right? It's you come up with a concept, and once that concept is there, now it sits there in WIP, and you make it and it sits in WIP, and you build it and it sits in WIP, and then you commission it. It's all, and they're not connected. And it creates a tremendous amount of cash to do that. And if we can do real concurrent production engineering and really advise each of the silos, I think you're going to make different decisions. And I think there's a huge opportunity to save time and cash and really increase the net present value of these investments.
Yeah, very good point. So Iris, what are your thoughts on the project of the future?
Yes, well, lots of thoughts that resonate very well with what has already been said with Martin's, terrific introduction to all the production tasks that are being automated today. So I was trying to think further out into the future than the things that we already have today. We mentioned the need in our industry for experience and then making decisions based on facts. I think the term experience is very much overrated, and it probably behooves us to better understand what kind of experience our future construction personnel is going to need. So I think of a lot of the experience that experienced professionals have, including myself, is actually experience based on kind of knowing what to do and knowing how to do it. But I would argue maybe sources of the kind of YouTube would tell us more how to do things, and sources of the kind of Google that allow us to scrape the internet will tell us more what needs to be done, which regulations apply in which context, and so forth. So that kind of experience maybe will become less relevant and more automated. In contrast, though, the kind of experience that is going to be needed more of is judgment, right? Is human decision making, as Martin mentioned so many times. Human decision making in terms of, for example, design methodology. My presentation this morning about tolerances was very much related to that. There's no robot that can help us manage the tolerance management process at this point in time. So there's more work to be done in automating, design tools, and then being clear where the human decision making, the human judgment needs to come in. I think there's also a lot of work to be done looking into data fusion. So beyond having robots that perform individual tasks, we need to look, of course, at robots working with people, the cobots, and then we also need to look at, why not have fleets of robots supporting fewer people, right? And how are robots going to collaborate with robots? And there maybe I have a somewhat more pessimistic view than the view that Bob just communicated about. How nice would it be if we can integrate all the data and share all the data? I agree. I think it would be wonderful if we can integrate and share the data, but there are a lot of people who want to own the data, and we should not take it for granted that they will be willing to share the data. Mm. And I think as academics, but I hope also industry will be behind this idea that it's going to be really important to collaborate on the data sharing. I mean, it's an old idea. We talked about supply chain management earlier in this symposium. Many of the problems with supply chain management come from the bullwhip effect, and the bullwhip effect in part is the result of lack of information as to how the supply chain is behaving. Likewise, I think we have a challenge ahead in sharing the data. Data that comes from instrumentation that comes on, for example, the bucket that you put in front of an excavator, as opposed to the data that comes from the excavator itself, as opposed to the data that comes from the operator who himself or herself may be somehow equipped with sensors as well. And how do we put all that together, and who's going to own the data? This is not a new question, certainly not. I'm not the only one who's skeptical about it, but the good news is there are some industry efforts underway. I spent some time in Germany earlier this fall, and one of the initiatives they have there, maybe Martin knows about it as well, is called MIC 4.0, Machines in Construction 4.0, where they're trying to bring industry equipment manufacturers together to agree on the sharing of certain kinds of data, not necessarily all the data that they're collecting with their sensors, but sharing certain kinds of data, not just between the bucket and the excavator, but also with, for example, the construction managers who need to make decisions, maybe other people on site who need to make logistics decisions. So I think that's where a lot of our work is headed. It's trying to bring the industry partners together and really envision where we need to collaborate, as in sharing data, and what we leave to compete. Of course, competition is a healthy venture as well.
Insightful. So Bob, reaction to that? Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of challenges with the sharing of data. Grabbing this data, the entire construction technology world is focused not necessarily on improving productivity. They're focused on taking this data and capitalizing on it. That's been really the big push, and a lot of the construction technology is come to us in the form of administration, things like Procore, right? That's really been the focus. It hasn't really been on production. And the reason it's been on administration is because the amount of data that they can glom and take advantage of is huge. And that's really been the push. The one who owns the data owns the world and the universe. And we see that across all industries. I think that we are so far away from the data sharing being that important to us. I think it's just, let's make the construction process transparent. It doesn't really matter how fast you do something but let's just start talking about it. And at least let's open our eyes to the fact that this is a complete production system. It really does matter. And just look at the simple things like the 5 levers and the whip, and it's all the stuff that makes so much sense. You don't have to get a ton of data out of the process to make some, massive changes to the process, and just start to inform it, the right way.
So you're headed on your own journey to the project of the future, but what I hear you saying is kind of the baby steps are, first off, realize you've got a production system, realize you need to bring transparency to it, be more deliberate around it, use the levers that control it, and start the journey there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's all about being curious, because I think the journey becomes addictive because, when you live in the trade contractor world like I have, you see all the problems, you just don't know how to solve them, or you just don't know why they're there. And then when you start looking through this operations science lens, all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, what the heck was going on all these years? Now I know why I shouldn't have, 1,000 feet of pipe sitting on the ground for a week. Why did I make 1,000? Why should I made 500? Or why did I make 1? And really start analyzing, the whole process, and then looking at the batch sizes, and then you start throwing some formulas against it, and you're like, holy moly, it's frightening that we've been wasting so much, but it's also so damn exciting because there's so much opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, I see a lot of heads nodding here. Martin, you probably have companies come to you and say, I want to get started here. What do you advise them?
I think I see us being where we were with respect to product or building or infrastructure or industrial facility design 20, 30 years ago, because we saw, and we have now, every one of us is now well aware of the power of a representation of what we build that can be seen, where multiple people can see the same thing, but that also has data and connects with computational capabilities, whether that's structural, energy, or and so we've all experienced that, and so that's, for me, is a blueprint of what we have to now do with production processes, and now we can, because at least the companies I work with, they don't have actually, they're used to using something like a BIM. Yeah, together we make the design of the building or whatever we are making better, through the expertise we can bring to the process, because we can look at it and because of the data we can draw from that model. And so now we need to do the same with our production processes, because very few production processes are done by one person. I mean, they are almost nothing. So it's, again, it has to be a collaborative approach. And so for that, we need a visualization and a computation tool. And I think that's what we have available now. That's what I would recommend. Start there. You know, you need to start relatively small in a few maybe departments, etc. Like we saw from the examples from the students, that was fantastic. But then, you know, start to think about how you're going to connect these production processes and how, so you can get to the bigger questions, you know, that Bob just brought up, and even questions beyond that. But that's why I would say you have this mindset. We need to build a digital twin of our production processes, digital and physical, that needs to be support collaboration of people with different backgrounds, and it needs to support simulation computation. And I know you guys have been working on this for a long time, but I think industry needs to now really jump into this.
Yeah,
I mean, as Churchill said, right, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think we're actually in a crisis mode right now. And I think, you know, people are looking for data. They're trying to get their hands on data. But if what we're going to actually deal with data is, you know, track, monitor, and progress management, then I think we should try to actually eliminate the need for that to begin with, right? So the question is, how do we actually do more with less people by innovating and automating what's remaining, and then eliminating what's not necessary? Right? I think that's what we need to actually focus on, because again, as we said, there's more work than we have people there at this point in time, and it's forecasted to remain, even get bigger gap there.
so let me switch gears on you a little bit here. So Tripatra is one of the first EPC companies we've seen really embrace a new way of doing things and thinking about things. Why don't you think we have greater impact uptake in the whole EPC community than we currently have on this project in the future, in this journey? Anybody want to take a hazard a guess?
Well, I mean,
Why don't we start with you,
I think, I mean,
Iris?
transparency isn't for everyone, right? Not everybody wants transparency. And this gets back to similar issues in supply chain management. It's sometimes very difficult to know what happens, you know, with the second tier and the third tier subcontractors on your project. You know, maybe if you're lucky, you know what your first tier subcontractor is doing, but it's you know, the what comes below is oftentimes very opaque. And there obviously is a lot of value in getting that transparency so that you can improve your decision making. In that sense, more data is usually better if you know how to use it smartly. But not everybody is interested in sharing.
Very good point. Bob,
Um,
you work with a lot of these folks.
I think, you know, it's production systems is about production. And the largest piece of the puzzle is the labor, right? That's your, you know, and the creation of actual physical transformation of pipe and fittings and things like that. You know, the data is a lot, but really it's the physical transformation, the labor required to do that. And a lot of it really comes down to the labor in the field. So unless you're actually direct hiring people, you don't necessarily see or feel the advantage of a production system mentality. True EPC companies who are actually doing tons of direct hire, I think they would be foolish not to want to adopt or dive into this full-fledged. But those who are really, you know, EPCMs, maybe they do some engineering procurement, but really they're really construction managers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that they see the advantage of this, because I think a lot of it proves some of the points that we should be limiting administration, which unfortunately a lot of construction management is built off the backs of this idea of more administration yields better results and less time and more certainty. So I think, you know, I think you're going to find that the bulk of your EPCMs or EPCs are really EPCMs, and they're hiring trade contractors and subcontractors all the time. And they haven't been forced into a position where the end result, when it comes to the time being saved or the amount of production that they get, hits their own personal bottom line. So I think that's probably why you see more of a lean over to like the LCI stuff and that, and really this idea of not focusing on the work as much, because they're not really doing the work itself.
Yeah, they're not feeling the pain as much or the potential benefit as you would, for example. That's really good, insightful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're looking at running our company, like our entire company, a series of 10 or 20 major projects at one time, and looking at it as one common production system,
Yeah.
because they intertwine. And I'm looking at, our goal in life was always, hey, less labor is better, right? Less work, subcontract work, that's how you mitigate all your risk. But when you start looking through this lens, you're like, hey, wait a minute, I should be just hiring labor myself or hiring guys T&M and taking on that responsibility, because that's where the uptake is for me. I can hire guys at a T&M rate, and as long as they operate within my production system, I can afford that 10% markup to the subcontractor, but the gains are so much greater because of this idea of the production system. So I think a lot of that is really where this lies.
That's really insightful. I agree. Martin, were you going to say something there?
I was reminded, it's curious what everybody else thinks, but a data point I got from our visitor we had a few years ago was talking about how Porsche improves its production system. And basically he said that I think it was something like that, for every 150 people producing work, they have one person that is thinking about how to improve that production. So in a factory of 1,200 people, they have 8 people focused on how do we make the production system better? How is it actually working? And I don't see these roles in our industry. Don't invest in that. I think that would help. I'm not sure that's the entire solution, but could be part of a solution of advancing more rapidly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hey, we got a really good question. It's kind of related to this. It's how will PPM relate to cost management and contract management in the project of the future? Anybody want to take that one?
So your cost management will, I was just thinking, am I simplifying too much? But I think it'll be pretty much automated. Because what we've seen in research we've done, when you go to great level of detail, which you will if you build a production model, then any kind of summary can be reduced very easily and rapidly, and you can close the loop at the detailed level, at a summary level. At you can then you can slice and dice the data as you need. If you have weekly progress per trade and you want to remunerate that, you can do that. Whatever way you do that, then you can do that. Your cost management gets complicated when you don't have detailed data, and then you need it in some cases, and then it becomes a mess of reconciling accounting's view with payroll's view with the job site deliveries with et cetera.
How does contracting need to change? Bob, what's your
this idea of cost, like what is cost management to me? You don't manage cost, you manage the things that create the cost. So we come up with all these terms, but at the end of the day, if you want to manage your costs, you manage the production and you manage the capacity and you manage those things, and you really don't manage those things. You just make sure that the stuff is there when it needs to be, and that you are, trying to work on the variability across the production system. So it's, and then this idea of what's a contract is something you put in play to hold people accountable, but I'm not sure that's risk avoidance. I'm not, PPM, you're looking at production management. You're looking at how do we improve the productivity across our production system through the mapping and studying of the science behind that. And really contract management and cost management, they just become a byproduct of what you're actually doing at that point.
Yeah. I had a great conversation with Ford about this, and it was so different than we were approaching it in Chevron. So we were using bidding to get better pricing. Okay. I know that's suboptimal. And Ford said, the price is a secondary issue to us. We look for people that we can work with, that have the technology we want, that can work within our production system the way we want. we know what things should cost. So cost is a secondary issue. We have a 2-page agreement and the costs are a non-issue because we know what it should cost. We worked that out. That's just a non-issue. The important issue is how they work together in our production system. And man, it just blew my mind because that's not how we approached it at all. So from my point of view, that's kind of what needs to happen differently in contracting, which I think is just what you're saying, Bob. Let's get the focus on the right things.
I mean, bidding and pricing is, I mean, if you bid projects, lump sum jobs like I do every day and I've done for 30 years, the actual cost of the thing is, I mean, that matters, but you're looking really at market. You're looking at how much margin can I actually put on it. How much competition do I actually have? None of those things have anything to do with really cost. They have to do with how do I make more money and survive in the business world. So it's, I can bid the same job tomorrow that I bid a year ago, and I can be, significantly different price. But basically the cost might just still be the same. It's just that snapshot in time. You only have one bidder. Guess what? You're going to pay more for me if there's only one bidder every single time. So it's just unrelated.
Yep. I hope we addressed the question. Any other thoughts on that topic before we wrap it up here? All right. Well, I thank you all very much for your time and effort and thoughts. And there's a lot of meat in this conversation that we just had. So I think we're ready to move on and talk about our next subject, which is around academic partnerships. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.